Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's Sunday night video. This week I'm covering the story of William Telford and the attempted murder of George Greenfield, which took place in Jarrow in 1878. I hope you will find it interesting. The past lives of those involved in this week's case for some reason were quite difficult to find due to some spelling errors among other things, so the details will be quite basic. William Telford was born in Scotland in around 1819 and was said to be around 59 years old at the time the crime was committed. He was frequently described as an old man, which is quite odd considering he was only 59, but that was seen as quite old back in the 1800s. He had married Elizabeth Greenfield in around 1858, and the couple had at least 2 children together. William also had a son from a previous marriage, and Elizabeth had at least 2 sons from her previous marriage. The family lived in Peel Street in Jarrow, and William worked as a caulker in the shipyards. Around 3 months prior to the crime, William and Elizabeth had separated, and William was now living alone. George Greenfield, the victim, was born in North Shields in around 1851. His father was a mariner, and he had died in 1856 when George was only a few years old. His mother had then married William Telford, and the family had moved to Jarrow. George worked as a plater and was still living at home with his mother. The rest of the family had all moved out. Before we go any further, can I just say, if you do enjoy this video, then please give it a thumbs up. And if you are new here or haven't already done so, then do please consider subscribing to the channel to help support the content we create. It really is appreciated, and it is completely free to subscribe. It doesn't cost you any money at all, but it really does help to support the channel. And I would just like to add, as I always do now, that I do record these stories live, so I do sometimes make mistakes, which I always try to rectify, so I hope this does not spoil your enjoyment of the video. On the night of September the 21st, 1878, William Telford went to the home of his wife in Jarrow and knocked on the door. George Greenfield answered, and the 2 men spoke to each other briefly before William stepped back a little from the door, pulled a gun from his coat and fired it at George, hitting him in the side. George turned and ran inside the house shouting "murder," and William simply walked away. 2 men who had been inside the house at the time and another man who had been outside heard the commotion and saw William trying to walk away. The 3 were able to overpower him and take the gun from him until PC Laycock arrived and took charge. And when William was taken to the police station and charged with shooting George Greenfield with intent to murder him, William replied, "Yes, it is right, I did it. I am not going to deny it." William would appear at Jarrow Police Court 6 times between September and October. Each time he was remanded as George was not well enough to attend the hearing. George had finally recovered enough for the hearing to take place on October the 31st, 1878. George Greenfield said he lived in Peel Street in Jarrow with his mother. He said William Telford was his stepfather. He said William had lived with them until June of that year, but he said there had been some disagreements between William and his mother, and he had decided to move out of the family home. He said he took some of his furniture with him, but not all of it. George said he had returned home to Peel Street on the night of the 21st of September at around 6 p.m. He had not long been inside when there was a knock at the door. When he opened it, William was standing there. He said, "I want to speak to you." George said he asked him what about, and William replied that he had not got all of his furniture from the house. George said he told him that that was his own fault. He said William said he could no longer get inside the house, and George said he told him he was quite aware of that. George said that William then stepped back a little from the doorway and said, "It's going to be a bad job." George said he told him it would be worse for him, explaining to the jury at the magistrate's hearing that he meant it would be worse for William because he was giving up his family home. He said William then pulled a revolver from inside his coat, pointed it at him and fired. George said he felt that he had been struck in the side, but did not really feel any pain. He said he quickly went inside, shouting, "Murder!" He said he was then taken to Dr. Whammon's surgery and the police were sent for. George said that Dr. Bradley had removed the shot from his side the same night. He said he had not been able to attend the court hearing until today as he had not been well enough and was still under the care of the doctor. When asked, he said he had not touched William in any way on the night of the 21st. He had only spoken a few words to him. He said he had seen him just shortly before he had knocked at the door. He was outside in the street, but at the time he said he did not know that he was coming to their house. He said the clothes he had been wearing when he was shot had been given to Superintendent Harrison to be examined. And he ended by saying that William had not been back to their home since he left in June last year, until the week before the shooting. He had then found him inside the house attempting to remove some furniture, and he had removed him from the house. He said he now paid the rent and William had no right to come inside. William Anderton of Low Walker said George Greenfield was his brother-in-law. He said he had been in the house in Peel Street on the night of the 21st. He had heard someone knock at the door and George answered it, but he did not say who was there. He said less than 2 minutes later he heard the sound of a gunshot, but he said he did not see what had happened. After he heard the gunshot, he said he ran towards the door just as George was coming inside with his hand on his left side, saying, "I am shot, murder." He said he immediately went outside into the street and saw William Telford walking away on the other side of the road as if nothing unusual had happened. He said he ran towards him and struck him a blow from behind. He was joined by George Bowman and Henry O'Hara, and they were able to keep hold of William until the police arrived. He said when William was on the ground, they were able to get the gun out of his hand, and Henry O'Hara took hold of it, and he later gave it to P.C. Laycock. George Bowman said he was a shopkeeper and had been passing Peel Street in Jarrow on the night of the 21st. He said he had seen William Telford standing at the door of a house. He later found this was the home of Mrs. Telford. He said he could not hear what was said or see clearly what happened, but he heard the sound of a gunshot and then saw William leave the door and begin to walk away. He said he saw William Anderton come running out of the same door and head towards William Telford. George said he had seen the gun in Mr. Telford's hand, and he quickly ran forward and grabbed him by the throat and forced him to the ground. He said with the help of the other two men, they were able to take the gun from him. He said the gun produced in court that day was very like the one he had seen in the prisoner's hand. Henry O'Hara said he had also been in the home of Elizabeth Telford in Jarrow on the night of the 21st, and his evidence was very much the same as that of George Bowman and William Anderton. P.C. Laycock said he found William Telford being held on the ground by the three men who had just given their statements. He said he'd been told of the shooting, and after taking charge of William, he at first took him to Dr. Whammon's surgery, where George Greenfield identified him as being the man who had shot him, saying, "That's him, take him away." P.C. Laycock said he had been given the gun by Henry O'Hara, and on examining it, he found it had been recently fired. Superintendent Harrison said he had gone to the Telford home in Jarrow where he had been given the clothes worn by George Greenfield when he had been shot. He said he found a hole through all of the items of clothing on the left side and some marks of blood. He had also gone to the doctor's surgery and had been present when the shot was removed from George's side. He said he had later charged William Telford with attempted murder and he had admitted to doing it, saying he would not deny it. Dr. Bradley said he had been called to Peel Street on the night of the 21st of September. He said he found George with a wound in his left side. It was a bad wound. He had been taken to the surgery and the shot had been removed from the wound. It was quite close to both the kidney and the spleen. He said it was a dangerous wound and George's life had been in danger. However, he was now recovering well and his life was no longer in danger. But the wound had not fully healed yet and he was still quite unwell. William Flynn said he was a general dealer with a shop in Pilgrim Street in Newcastle. He said William Telford had been in his shop twice on September the 21st. He said the first time Mr. Telford had shown him 2 pistols and asked him what he thought of them. He said he had told him that they were quite common pistols that he had. He said later the same day Mr. Telford returned and asked to buy a gun. He said he sold him one for 15 shillings, and being short of money, he took the 2 pistols from Mr. Telford until he could make the rest of the payment. He said Mr. Telford told him he would be back later that day, but he never returned. He said the police took the pistols away the following Monday. George Greenfield was recalled and stated that he had never had any argument with William Telford. He said when he had argued with his mother, he had not taken sides and kept out of it. He was asked how William had got into their house the week before the crime was committed, and he said he had climbed in via the hatch of the ash pit. No further evidence was given, and the magistrates, after a brief discussion, committed William Telford for trial on a charge of attempted murder. The trial took place in Durham in January of 1879 before Mr. Justice Brett. William pleaded not guilty to the charge. As is often the case, the evidence given at the trial is very much the same as that given at the inquest, or in this case, the magistrate's hearing, so I will only include any new information, of which on this occasion there is very little. George Greenfield spoke of his father being a hard-working man, his stepfather, who had always been in regular employment. He had spoke of the disagreements between William and his mother, but he did not go into detail of what they argued about. He said since the shooting he had been unable to work and was still suffering very much and was often in great pain. Superintendent Harrison said he had made inquiries into the previous character of William Telford, and although no one gave evidence at the trial, he stated everyone spoke highly of him, saying he was steady and industrious and well liked. The defence spoke to the jury, suggesting to them that William had no intention to take the life of George Greenfield. He said he was upset at not getting his furniture and at being removed from the house the week before, and simply wanted to frighten George, or at worst, commit grievous bodily harm. He said William was an old man of good character with no previous convictions. I did not find any details of the prosecution or the judge summing up, and the jury, who retired for a short time, returned a verdict of guilty of attempting to do grievous bodily harm, rejecting the charge of attempted murder. The judge then spoke to William, saying that he was seen as a hard-working, respectable man, but even respectable men can act in passion. He said he believed that being thrown out of the house he used to live in and had made him very angry, and that he had gone to Newcastle and bought the gun for the purpose of seeking revenge against George Greenfield. He said the jury had taken the merciful view by not finding him guilty of attempted murder, but he could not ignore the evidence that this crime was deliberate and carefully planned, and if the jury had found him guilty of attempted murder, he would have sent him to prison for life. If his stepson had not recovered, he would have sentenced him to death. However, he would now sentence him to 10 years penal servitude. I did not find any further details of William Telford after this date, so I do not know which prison he was sent to serve out his sentence or any details of when he was released, but I doubt that he ever returned to Peel Street in Jarrow. Sadly, I was also not able to find any further details of George Greenfield, but I hope that he eventually made a full recovery and was able to return to work and take care of his mother. This was another very odd case, as they often are. The motive for the attack on George Greenfield seems to be nothing more than the fact that he had thrown William out of the house when he had sneaked in via the ash pit. George had rightly decided that as William no longer lived there and did not pay the rent, he was not welcome inside, especially not when he had broken in, and throwing him out had made William very angry. It is clear that William planned the attack, buying the gun at Newcastle and going to the house with it in his coat, but it's not really clear if he intended to kill or if, like the defence suggested, he had simply meant to frighten George with the gun. It is possible that he did intend to fire the gun, but fired low, thinking this would only be a minor wound or would miss George completely. He certainly did not run away from the scene, simply casually walking away, perhaps not even aware of how much damage he had done. Were the jury correct to find him guilty of the lesser charge of grievous bodily harm? Well, to be honest, I'm not really sure, as I am still not completely sure what William had planned when he bought the gun and went to the house. But if I am honest, I don't feel that he just meant to frighten George. He didn't need to fire the gun at him at all to do that. So I'm leaning more towards him intending to murder George. So I think the guilty verdict should have reflected that. Was the judge correct to sentence him to 10 years penal servitude? Well, yes, I think he was. I think the judge felt it was a much more serious crime than the jury believed, and the sentence was most likely the most he could pass for grievous bodily harm. But what do you think? Do you think William was annoyed at being thrown out of what he probably still felt to be his own home, and that this made him want revenge against George Greenfield? Do you think he planned to commit murder or simply wanted to frighten George? Was being thrown out of his one-time home enough to make him want to commit murder? Do you think the jury were correct to find him guilty of grievous bodily harm, or should he have been found guilty of attempted murder and sent to prison for life? Do please let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I do hope that you have found this very strange and sad story interesting, and I do thank you all very much for watching, and I do hope to see you all again next week.